Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Live podcast, our weekly edition. Glad to have you join with us. If you would, as you join us, please put into the comments where you're joining from, and also consider, if you would, joining in the discussion by adding thoughts and questions in the comments as well, because this is podcast is not just about me talking. It's about us engaging in our topic and having good discussion, and ultimately being able to walk away having gained some wisdom. And for us on the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast, the way we see wisdom is that it's a journey, and it starts with knowledge. We gain and get insight into information, facts, figures, historical information, so on. Then part of the journey is to take the next step. And the next step is to gain understanding in regards to the knowledge we have, and begin to apply that knowledge and use it hopefully constructively. I know some don't always use it constructively, but so the next step is to take our knowledge and start using it in our lives, and grow and build from it. And many stop with just getting the knowledge, and that is unfortunate, because knowledge by itself is just information. It really doesn't do anything. As we learn to apply it, of course, that is a good thing, and we began to utilize it and bring value to others with it, and to ourselves. But the last step is the one that the fewest actually take going forward, and that is to begin to seek wise perspective, to become wise. And that step, probably the biggest thing there, is that we take the step to look at our knowledge and our understanding from a bigger perspective, a perspective that, if done right, is outside of ourselves. And it is based on how this will affect not just me, but others. And for those of us that have kind of a spiritual bent, our goal is that we want to see things and use what we have gained knowledge-wise and understanding as a perspective through God's eyes. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about wisdom. It is not an event. It is a process, and it's ongoing, hopefully, for those that seek it. And I hope that you become, if you're not already, a seeker of wisdom, because you gain a lot more when you truly seek it out. So welcome, Jeffrey. Glad to have you. Hope your drive home was safe. Got to meet with Jeffrey in person last week. Hello, Rosemary. Good to see you from Sydney always. And welcome, Nia. Please correct me if I say it wrong, your name wrong. I like to respect people's names as we address them, but greetings from India. Glad to have you. And so I was looking over LinkedIn. I was getting caught up this weekend. Was in training for multiple days this weekend, or end of last weekend, this weekend. So as I was catching up, I came across a post from a good friend on LinkedIn named Rosemary. Roseanne Way, and got me thinking about this topic. And it's a big topic right now, and that is strengths versus weaknesses, and how we address them. And so we have to really consider and hopefully begin to gain wisdom in regards to it, and to consider the implications of it, and becoming intentional about strengths versus weaknesses. And I think we're going to have a lot of different areas to really look this over and consider it. As most of you know that have been around this podcast know that it's rare that we walk away that with a one size fits all answer, but rather we delve in and gain greater insights into topics so that we begin to see them from a wise perspective and so on. So welcome, Chris, to our podcast today. And Chris has got a comment. Let's look at that, because again, what we are about here is not just me up talking, but rather it is about us seeking gaining wisdom together. Chris says knowledge is important, but as you said, it's only the first step. It is only when we apply the knowledge we get the next level. And when we try to try something, we start to put our knowledge into action. Insightful comments. Thank you so much for that, Chris. And yes, one of the things that's always troubled me is that we, at one point in our culture, really emphasize saying that knowledge is power. And knowledge is, I guess, in one sense, the fact that it is the beginning of wisdom, it can be powerful. But knowledge by itself isn't powerful. There are lots of books on lots of shelves. There is Google and Siri and all the other search capabilities that help you find knowledge. But if you can't apply it, it is limited in use. And then if you don't know how to apply it at the right times, right places, in the right way, then you are going to find what happens when you make unwise choices and do things unwisely. And welcome, Mary. Always glad to hear from Mary, a good friend from Florida. And I appreciate that her comment. She, along with commenting on the topic, she makes this comment that we need to discern the importance of this message and that she's grateful. So thank you for that support, Mary, and hopefully we, by the time we're done, we will have dug into this a bit and gained some wisdom in regards to it. And welcome, Zaid, one of our regulars as well, and appreciate you being here today. So a lot of discussion in and around the topic of strengths and weaknesses, and there have been multiple books written on it. In fact, there are a couple of people here on LinkedIn that have written books about strengths and weaknesses. And so it's a valid topic. The question becomes how we approach. And one thing I do want to suggest is if we're going to be wise in our approach to this, is we've got to be intentional about truly understanding our strengths and weaknesses. One way that we can approach this is, of course, with time. And if you're looking for where your strengths and weaknesses are, you can find them. And it takes time. If you choose to approach it without using some tools that are available to us, certainly can happen that way. But in order to truly make it happen, it has to be intentional. And I think there are a lot of people that are in our culture that never really become intentional about it. And therefore, they are going to have to learn, as we say, old fashioned is, we're from the school of hard knocks. And I think that's, I mean, no, I don't think, I know it's certainly a way to make it happen, because, I'm up a few years down the road from many of you. And there was a time where we didn't have tools for this, other than I have to say we have one tool, but unfortunately, culturally, we have dismissed that. But the Bible is a good way to help us be intentional in finding out our strengths and weaknesses. And but we have additional tools now that's very helpful. And so the key to start the process is to actually take time and effort to find out about our strengths and weaknesses. And and we have to be careful not to approach strengths and weaknesses purely on an emotional basis, because some people talk about um, that our passion our passion is an indicator of strengths and weaknesses. Challenge there is that our passion can be at times influenced unduly, and if we only use that, we'll go down a wrong path or get out of priority. Welcome, Karen from Florida. Glad to have you as always. So let's see. Rosemary offers a comment. Says, oftentimes we don't understand that we have made an unwise choice until afterwards. However, it only remains unwise if we don't correct ourselves. That is such a true statement, Rosemary, that wisdom doesn't necessarily come quickly, and it doesn't happen the first try. In fact, I can tell you it doesn't happen the first try. What happens is we can gain a level of wisdom the first try, but that doesn't mean that we have gained all the wisdom there is to know about it. And so wisdom is not once and done. It is an ongoing process. And that's why it's important to, for those of us that want to grow wise, is to always be seeking it. Again, I know I'm of the more seasoned variety age-wise, but every day I approach with the idea of gaining some new piece of wisdom, which may mean a new piece totally, or it could be a new piece in regards to something that I already had gained some wisdom in. It's a growth process. So well put, Rosemary. So again, strengths and weaknesses, and getting those in place, and truly having an understanding of those strengths and weaknesses is important. And from there, though, then we have to decide something. So we know we have these set of strengths and we have a set of weaknesses. Well, culturally, we are pushed quite often to be well-rounded. And I guess one could discuss the definition of well-rounded, but the implication is that we should know a bit about everything. And I get that. And on some level, I can appreciate that, to be able to converse or what have you with others in regards to various topics. But the problem is that we have are getting people to invest a lot in becoming well-rounded. And we even talk about the idea of always overcoming weaknesses. And again, we get into terminology and we could get into semantics, but the question is the better approach to overcome weaknesses or grow in our strengths, or it's possible it could be a combination. And then we have to go further and decide, how do we approach this as an individual, as an organization, and so on. And so it's a very complex topic, because there isn't one thing of, well, we just all have to learn and grow into our strengths. And that's those of you that follow my content, follow the live streams I'm on, know that I am very big that we've got to avoid trying to find formulas, because there are very few formulas that work for everybody in life. And that's why when I coach people, I don't approach it with one size fits all package. That I try to get people to take my package and then be able to plug themselves into it and fit into my package, because that's not the way life is. We are each unique and we're at different stages in life. So we're not looking for a one size fits all, but we have a lot of people trying to do that. I have friends that talk about only focusing on our strengths and going forward in that fashion. And then I have people that say, well, we need to be getting outside of our comfort zone and overcoming our weaknesses and so on. So as we go through, by the way, if you have incidences of where you have dealt with strengths and weaknesses and even identify them for yourself, I would enjoy hearing from you because I think other people can grow from your experience and insights. Thank you, Karen, for the comment. And what is a weakness and how we define a weakness? Weakness is something, for example, in my life, I know a weakness I have is that I like music and I like to sing, and I would love to be able to play instruments and all of that. And what I have discovered is that's a weakness that certainly I can spend time on. I can spend money on it. I have done some, not major investments or major time efforts, and try to become a quality level performer even. But for me, I know from that is a weakness for me. As much as I'd like to do it, it would not be a good use of time and resources to try to overcome it. So it doesn't mean that for the sake of others only when I'm by myself that I can't sing and do, the whole bit, air drumming and all that kind of thing and have fun. But for me to spend a whole lot of time and energy on it is probably not a good use or wise use of my resources and time to pursue it. Whereas one of my strengths that I have come to understand and had to initially, I learned about this strength in being able to repair or work on and understand mechanical devices. And so it's become kind of a joke that for me, when anyone has in my family, they have something that's not working right, they reach out to me because of my experience and this strength to a point that sometimes we joke that all I have to do is to walk into the room or start discussing it and it starts working again. And so that's an example for me of a strength that is based in being able to understand processes and how things work. And so that's a strength. And then I have the question of, do I focus on using that and developing it? Or do I spend time working on trying to become a singer and or musician? And those are the types of things that we need to face and consider and be intentional, because when we do that, we start beginning to be more effective and we start having victories, if you will, in our life because of being able to function in our strengths. Let's see, Jeffrey has a comment. I'm not sure it is an either or question. There are many times when you need to work on improving a weak area, and there may be times when it may be wise to bolster an existing strength. And Jeffrey, I have to agree that I don't think there is a one size answer for this, a formula that's going to affect it. But I think the key is that we've got to be intentional in understanding strengths and weaknesses and intentional in considering whether we need to go one way or another. Welcome, Lee. Glad to have you with us today, and appreciate your being here. And so, strengths and weaknesses. For example, I know I use my own examples in that one of my weaknesses, if you will, and again, depends on how you define weakness, is when video capability first came out on LinkedIn, I had a lot of people telling me, well, you need to start doing video. Well, at that point in my life, if you wanted me to work behind the scenes when there was video and recording going on, I could jump in and be the best there was. Because remember, I can figure out how things work, and who knows, probably even be able to repair some video equipment and things. But you put me in front of the camera, and especially if it is going to be recorded and become a big deal, it was just nerve-wracking for me. Tended to break out in a sweat and could not share my words well, fumble around, and it was just a very uncomfortable situation. I had friends that even tried to help me along with doing these videos on LinkedIn. And boy, it was a struggle. And I wrestled with it for literally for months. I would, it's easy to physically easy to make a video with our phones now. But I would take my phone and make a video, and then I would, and if I could get through a session of recording something, which was a challenge by itself, I'd go back and look at it and go, oh my, that's terrible. And so I actually had a good friend. He was on LinkedIn and off LinkedIn, a guy named Judd Borakove, who is very good with the video world. And when it came out, he just said, make a video. Don't worry about whether it's really good or not. Just make a video and post it. Don't try to edit. Don't try to make it perfect. And so after numerous attempts at that, I was able to finally get my first LinkedIn video posted. And it was just, hey, hi, this is me. How are you? I like this, or, very simple. But for me, that took a lot of effort. And in that case, there was value in my getting outside of the comfort zone, my comfort zone, to grow, because it was a part of what is necessary to be able to move forward in a direction that I was going to need to, such as doing this podcast. I can't imagine trying to do this back when I was first trying to overcome this. It would just not, it would not be pretty, and not at all. Not that this is all that pretty either, but it's okay. At least I can function and articulate a bit in front of the camera. So let's see. Zaid says, interesting topic, Kevin. As I'm listening, one size fits all and well-rounded person, education, especially higher education, comes to my mind. They want us all to learn in a way, regardless of our strengths and weaknesses. And yes, I agree completely, Zaid. In fact, I think in the description, I talk about how that culturally through the education system, and I'm speaking of the institutional education system, one of the big pushes is for us to be well-rounded. And as a result, I don't know if you have taken college courses. I have. And looking at degree requirements, one of the, among many, one of the things that always surprised me, and I've heard numerous people complain about, is that, for example, my education is in human resources, but yet I still had to take a lab science. Why? Okay. And in that environment, higher education costs. And so it added to my cost, and to what end other than, I don't believe the principles of the science are a direct relationship to human resources, unless you get into some non-physical science kinds of worlds, and those don't qualify for a lab science at the time anyway. And so the push was to be well-rounded, know about all kinds of topics. I don't know that it is wrong, but why should we be required to devote money and time to that in order to be recognized for our ability from an education standpoint? And I really do, like you, Zaid, question that greatly. And Jeffrey echoes about being intentional. And welcome, Dr. Jesmond. Glad to have you. No problem. We just late is okay. We're just glad you're here. And so we just got to be very intentional about this, as again, as Jeffrey comments, that we've got to approach this very intentional. And I would suggest that how we answer this question individually is different than an organizational view of it. And what came to mind as I was considering this topic is that I think about sports teams. We would not likely, especially game day, we wouldn't take a guy that has all the talents in the world of a quarterback and strengths and, built for it and all that, and say, okay, well, we want you to be well-rounded, so we're going to put you on the offensive line, and so that you can overcome your weaknesses and grow in that and become more well-rounded. If our goal is to be effective with who we are and with our strengths and weaknesses, it becomes obvious that's not a good idea. So as we approach the concept of strengths and weaknesses as an organization, the idea of being well-rounded is one that I don't think is a good idea. Not in terms of making it a priority or pushing people into that situation. Again, I believe that's what we do, and I think it comes out as we consider job descriptions and the like. By the way, I normally mention that sometimes it looks like I'm distracted doing other things. I'm looking at a couple other screens to make sure that we're working correctly. So please don't feel like I'm not focused on what we're talking about. So get back to comments. Zaid's comment, maybe the well-rounded point is just the marketing selling point, while in reality, it's about the money. I can certainly appreciate that you would raise that question. I think it's a very valid question, Zaid. I also think that it's about trying to raise education, formal education, to a level maybe that is beyond what it should be. In my opinion, education has value, but it should be in order for a person to grow into and be productive in whatever they're going to be doing from a work standpoint or what vocational standpoint, rather than to make well-rounded people. It's especially higher education is not an end in itself. Should be a means to another end, and therefore it should be designed in such a way that it helps most effectively and efficiently reach that end, rather than it becoming being something of its own, rather than a part of a bigger process. And Dr. Jesmond comments that bias is another issue. Yes, unfortunately, as a culture, we have developed a bias in the sense that we have what we consider better strengths and weaknesses versus lesser ones. And as a result, we see, again, we've been talking education, and I think it's a system that needs to be challenged on a big level, but we have made levels of education somehow a way of evaluating people, that people that are more educated are going to be more successful, they're better, have greater character, all this stuff. And one of my favorite comments about education is education doesn't make us better, it makes us more educated. Excuse me. And that's primarily in the sense of having gained more knowledge. So let's see. Rosemary's got a comment. I started writing a weekly post on LinkedIn. I call it Monday Muses simply because I had something I wanted to say and it happened to be on a Monday. I like that, Rosemary. Keep it simple and yet have a little catchiness to it. Tonight I posted the 401st Monday Muse. Wow. I hope you're collecting these, Rosemary. Sounds like makings of a book. And at the time I started, I was not good at writing for others to read. Plus, LinkedIn articles were difficult to write on. The platform kept crashing. Oh, yes, I remember that. However, now I have people all over the world reading my thoughts. I had to get way out past any perceived comfort zone. Yeah. So weaknesses in the sense of at times overcoming them has value, but do we need to be again pushing the one size fits concept of everybody needs to be overcoming their weaknesses so that they can be well-rounded, that somehow that we will be better because we can do more. And I think that's where my big rub comes in. And I think it's insightful. And as Jeffrey commented or echoed, that a key here is intentionality. Don't just kind of float along and let it happen to us. If we're intentional, seeking wisdom, that's a verb. It's not just a passive concept. It's a verb. When we are about seeking wisdom and growing in that wisdom for us individually, that's a good thing, Karen. Yes, congratulations, Rosemary. That's quite an accomplishment. So very good. And in fact, if you can put a link in the comments to where those are housed, I suspect that many of us would like to go check some of those out, because I have a feeling that your musings have some wisdom to offer in it, and may want to, some of us may want to go read it and tag it with the hashtag of hashtag wisdom nugget, because I got a feeling they're there. So being intentional as we go through considering strengths and weaknesses, and that that means determining if we need to focus on overcoming whatever weakness it is, or do we need to spend a lot of time developing our strengths. And again, it becomes a priority as to what we're about in life, as to how much time we even spend on strengthening our weaknesses. Strengthening our strengths, growing in our strengths. Because if it's a strength, it may be that doesn't need to be a focus either. We just need to recognize it, accept it, and grow in it by using it, rather than looking for ways to get better at it, sort of, if you will. So intentionality in this area is important. As organizations, I think that we need to consider, as we put people in situations, that our first priority for the organization, for the team, for the person, for a lot of reasons, is to find people's strengths and help them work in those strengths. And two reasons. One is that as we work in our strengths, we are able to have victories and accomplishment, and therefore a sense of, if you will, victory or success to encourage us to keep going. Second of all, if in an organizational structure, if we're going to use strengths and weaknesses well, we need to use them not in a competitive fashion, but in a complementary fashion. Because what that does is that it helps to maximize effectiveness of the organization. And when I use term organization, it could be a small organization like a team, or it could be a Fortune 100 company. But the principle would be there that we are looking at ways to be complementary so that we organize a team that has strengths. Each person has strengths in it, and that hopefully those strengths complement the weaknesses of the other persons or other members of the team. Welcome, Jack. Glad to have you. And let's see, he has a comment. This may be a granular detail compared to the topic. However, the component that needs to be looked at the most for universities is the general education component to our freshman, sophomore levels, as well as making universities very agile on allowing students to transition to a degree that is monetarily needed in the economy. My point is that general education requirement is so massive in some cases, it's replicating what should be covered at the high school level. This raises, it got cut off, Jack. And I agree that, and I'll try not to go on a tangent because I'm very passionate in regards to our education system. But again, what we've got to get away from in education is that education and the experience of going through education is somehow a means or an end in itself, because it's not. It never was designed to be, but culturally, unfortunately, we have made that a cultural pursuit to somehow create value. Whereas, as you've observed, Jack, that we would be better off allowing for, we need a foundational component of literacy. But I would even challenge what we've determined is that foundational concept, because in related to this topic, there are some people that are wired better for different academic pursuits. And I know this because I am a trainer in an adult education world. And one of the pursuits that has created problems in the adult functioning world is the area of math. We have educationally prioritized math to a point and a level that is not necessary for the majority of people in terms of their function and productivity in the world of work and life. And it's really misaligned terribly. And I would argue another example of this is in the area of languages, and that we have misaligned priorities as to what most people need in terms of language. We need to be very capable in communicating, okay? Base level communication, being able to express ourselves, no doubt, and to read and understand others' communication. But we have allowed the pursuit of academic language to a point that we are forcing young people in the education world to do things that really are not necessarily, other than to say we're trying to make them well-rounded, and that's the only rationale for it. So I get what you're talking about, and I think that we need to reapproach it as to what the general education is about, and then from there determine, if needed, what specializations and specialized education is needed, and revamp the whole process, frankly. But I appreciate you raising the topic. Rosemary makes a comment to pointed at Jack, says CTC training. Training people to train other people is simply regurgitation of outmoded practices. Yeah, let's all learn how to repeat the mantra, and that becomes the process. And there's some level where repetition and rote memory is is valuable. But the problem is much of education has become about, as you say, Rosemary, just keep regurgitating the same things over and over to each other. And once you do that and you pass the test, you theoretically become qualified, which we are unfortunately having demonstrated is not the case. And to kind of bring it back around to what we're talking about, it is being pushed by this thing of being well-rounded rather than growing into who we are in our strengths and weaknesses, and making intentional choices to develop and grow based on our strengths and weaknesses. And yes, there's some commonalities to work from with each other, no doubt, but not as much commonalities as we're being pushed into in our education world. And let's see, Jack makes an additional comment, says it's creating adjunct professor jobs to increase what is mastery to get that degree, not helping the overall economy or the educating purpose. Yes, it has become a part of a production style of education, so that we just put everybody through the same production line, add all the same parts on, that will then produce supposedly qualified people. And by the way, it's not working, just for the record. In fact, one of the areas that I work in is in the world of apprenticeships, and dealing with people in that world. And I've recently, as I've continued to grow and understand this whole concept, that it's really interesting that we make education such a big deal. But for example, and Dr. Jesmond, I hope you'll step in and correct me if I'm wrong, but as a medical person, especially if you're going to be an MD and going to be dealing with people on a health level, you go through all this education, but you don't stop there when you get a degree. You have to spend time being what is now called in residence, but in the reality, residency is a form of apprenticing, going out and under a mentor or under the guidance of someone, beginning to take what you learned in all this institutional education and learning how to do something with it. And so why not, rather than go through all of the education steps, which even for doctors and other professions are not necessary, why do we not give them what's necessary, and even consider having it focused more in an apprentice environment from the beginning? Just a thought. And the one answer I come to conclude in that arena is that, again, back to what Jack says, it's more about production. It's more about the money and all those things than it is about being effective. And yes, I like what you say, Dr. Jesmond. I think that education is a continuous process. And I even go so far, and I probably get in trouble with this one, but I think we have put learning in jail, and the jail is called education. And I think we need to free the learning from education so that it is a continuous process. It's not a, once I get my degree, I've got all the I need to be successful, which is, again, proving not to be true. So back to the topic of strengths and weaknesses. We all have them. I think part of the problem is we don't all take time and effort to understand them. Okay. In fact, we look at other people's strengths and weaknesses, and rather than saying, okay, I have a similar strength or a similar weakness, we start saying, well, I want to do theirs. I want to be like them. And again, I go back to my own example. I would love to be a singer, and I'd love to be like some of the great singers that we've had in the past and all that, but I can wish for it and even try for it and pursue it with lots of money, whatever. And there's a point where I have to come to grips with that. It's not the way I'm designed. It is a weakness in terms of, if I see that it's necessary to be successful in life is to sing, then it's a weakness. But the reality is, even that, it's not a weakness other than in my perception. It's just something I can't do, and that's okay. Just like other people's weaknesses are things they can't do. And the idea that we've got to help people or make people be everything is where I think our foolishness comes in. And this notion that in order for me to be successful, to be well-rounded, quote unquote, another course I had to take in when I was in university education was a course on the history of classical music. And I appreciate classical music, and I certainly have value there. But should I be spending money and forced to spend time to learn that? And for example, I know, because I teach and that's one of my strengths, I know the value of classical music in the area of learning for some people. But does that mean that I should force them to learn the history of classical music and to apply it in order to become have a greater strength or be more well-rounded? No, I can suggest that people consider it, but the idea that people should be forced to become, under the guise of being well-rounded, should be forced to spend time and energy pursuing these things or learning about it or whatever, I think is unwise. Yeah, I figured when we started into education, Rosemary, you'd have some thoughts, and you always have some good ones. It says, I have 3 of my grandchildren doing school-based apprenticeships. One of them is halfway through his mechanical engineering apprenticeship, and the other 2 have just started. The one who is halfway through is already 2 years ahead of his counterparts who won't start university until next March. And it's interesting, Rosemary, that there is a mechanical engineering apprenticeship, because in the U.S., theoretically the only acceptable way to become a mechanical engineer is to go and get a degree. Whereas I think there are a lot of people that are apprenticed in different trades that have the level of understanding and insight and ability same as a mechanical engineer, but they don't get recognized for it, unfortunately. And yes, Jack, you have gone to one of my favorites. In fact, one of my articles on the topic of education, I use this quote, and it's, everybody's a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. And I think that's unfortunately the world we are in, is that bigger picture commentary. If you do not have a university degree, you are counted as stupid, or led to believe, it leads us to believe somehow we're stupid, that because we don't have a degree. And just for the record, the majority of us don't, to the tune of about 70% of the current population don't have degrees. And that's in the US. I suspect if we look at it on a worldwide basis, that percentage is much higher. Therefore, you can't even say, well, everybody does it, so it's justified. But so Karen makes a comment, says, I concur with you in the area of learning. However, it all depends on the higher education requirements and institutional curriculum. And you're right, Karen, there are some education entities out there that are approaching this, in my opinion, well. But unfortunately, in our education world, those are very, very, very rare, because in order to be funded and accepted and all that. You've got to do these other things. And so, yes, I will tell you that, for example, I'm involved in two different organizations on the board of them in education. One's called Internship International University. I'm sorry, International Internship University. And the other is the International Institute of Influencers. And they are trying to break the mold and look at education in terms of more based in people's needs and also providing access to it. And then I have a good friend here on LinkedIn that has got an educational initiative that is, in my opinion, much better. It's called Classroom Without Walls. So we're seeing some efforts and some overcoming of how we approach education in different realms. And I hope that you will be a part in helping to encourage and support those efforts, because we will, through those, more likely be able to have the education system that is designed to develop people well, and not just develop them to take tests and follow the book, but to truly learn and think for themselves. And so there is some, but the overarching situation is that in our current education systems, it's about producing well-rounded people with degrees. I think that's a dangerous precedent, and I think it's causing us individually to feel like if we're not quote unquote well-rounded, we're less than. And I think it influences the way our businesses approach things, and therefore end up approaching them unwisely as a result, because we effectively we ignore people's strengths and weaknesses, and we try to put them into the boxes that we think are the right boxes. So let's see, Rosemary, love to hear stories about your grandchildren and their pursuits. I'll share one in a minute about my own. One of my sons says Dylan's path is well planned out. He will finish his apprenticeships the end of 2023. Then he plans to go to Canada for 12 months to learn ice welding. Wow, that sounds fascinating. After that, return to Australia to get a degree in civil engineering via a program that is offered via NASA. The plan to be part of the team that builds the habitats on the moon and Mars. Wow, what a pursuit. I hope that fits Dylan's strengths well, and that sounds really good. Let's see, Dr. Jesmond says, excellent talk. Still, medical education needs a lot of refinement. And yeah, Dr. Jesmond, I don't think it's medical education only. I think the total system needs a lot of refinement, changing, because a lot of the philosophy around our current education is this notion of well-roundedness. And if you want to get into a little trivia about education, this concept actually originates with Ben Franklin and a concept called universal education. So if you ever want to dig into it, look into universal education and some of the concepts that Benjamin Franklin was about. And by the way, though, Benjamin Franklin's idea of being well-rounded had a whole different context than it's being used today. So don't pick on poor Ben Franklin about this topic. But at the end of the day, we need to take time, if we're going to be wise, and be very intentional in regards to our own strengths and weaknesses. And then as we collect people organizationally, how we gather those people in their strengths and weaknesses as an organization. One of the best thing I can do if I'm going to build a team is not seek people that are like me or always agree with me, but rather to find people with complementary strengths to my weaknesses and to each other's weaknesses so that we can effectively function together. But now, one of the keys to even that is that we have to learn to understand that I don't need you to be like me, and you don't need me to be like you to make us okay. The other part of the problem is that rather than judging one strength over another or one weakness over another, it is we all have them, strengths and weaknesses. That's all of who we are. And learning to accept each other's strengths and weaknesses doesn't mean that if one of our weaknesses is being rude and inconsiderate, that means, oh, well, it's okay for you to be rude and inconsiderate. No, it just means for the moment, that's who you are, where you are, and you need to, that's one that may need to be overcome. So the point is, let's be intentional and very make sure that we understand the concepts of strengths and weaknesses, consider the various tools that we have out there, the books. There are assessments that are out there that help us in this regard. So we need to use those tools to help us get insight. And one of them, by the way, just one of my personal favorites is the Bible. It has a lot to say about who we are and our strengths and weaknesses. And so we need to intentionally pursue and understand that and consider, is something that we perceive as a weakness, it is actually not a weakness, but it's an underdeveloped or undiscovered strength. What I found out, and give you an example of this, is when I went into teaching, I had no formal training or education or whatever to be a teacher. I was hired based on my expertise in a career area. But once I got in there, I discovered that I actually had certain strengths and talents in regards to it. And as a result of taking some initial steps, stepping outside of my comfort zone, I was able to uncover a strength that became an integral part of what I do now. And so it has a great impact on me. And if you're interested in knowing more about that story, it's an article on my profile about it called Defining Moments. But let's be intentional. Let's go and in our intentionality, look for ways to become wise in regards to our strengths and weaknesses, as well as looking at strengths and weaknesses in our organizations, on our teams. If you're a leader, you need so much to not only be intentional about your strengths and weaknesses, but about strengths and weaknesses of all of your team members in order to be effective. So I think that my takeaway is that the well-rounded person is not a wise pursuit. Having insights and understandings about a lot of things, I'm as big on that as anybody else, but it's not something that should be forced on us and that should be a priority to us. It should be that we learn to identify strengths and weaknesses, develop our strengths, operate in our strengths, consider that some of our weaknesses may be actually unidentified strengths or underdeveloped strengths, but and at times that they're even our true weaknesses, there may be value in overcoming them. So be very intentional about this. Find out about your strengths and weaknesses so that you can become wiser in how you approach it and how you, if you have influence on others, helping them approach it. So thank you, everyone. I really appreciate all of you today being here. I know Rosemary's got to fold. It's late in her time zone, and I appreciate, though, that Rosemary's always kind enough to be here with us, because we gain from Rosemary, and all of you that make an effort, because I know that you're in many different time zones. So thank you for that. I look forward to next week. I have not determined the topic yet. I am working on some guests coming on over the next few weeks. And as that comes to fruition, I will get that information out. Oh, welcome, Kwame. Glad to have you. I appreciate you and your comment about being an interesting topic. So again, thank you, everyone. Have an amazing week. Be blessed. Seek and gain wisdom. And please share your wisdom with others so that hopefully they can gain some wisdom without having to do it the hard way. Take care. Have a great week.